Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion. It is Monday, May 24th, 2021. And as you can see by all the tabs I've got open up there, we have a lot to talk about. Hopefully you will be informed, educated, and maybe even a little bit inspired by the time I'm done with you today, teaching you what I know, showing you what I'm looking at across the world of the tropics, lower 48 weather, and even a couple of treats for you before all is said and done here. So let's start off with a satellite animation courtesy of Tropical Tidbits. A few things of note. Nice and quiet out across the main development region. Dry, stable air located here. Intertropical convergent zone generally suppressed to the south. We typically don't see that migrate north until later in the season. You also see this band of upper level winds cutting across the Caribbean and out into the subtropical Atlantic. Strong upper level winds generally coming out of the west through here, just way too strong to allow any organized areas of convection, if there were any, and there's not. They're all far to the south here, like I mentioned in the ITCZ, but even that has strong upper level winds cutting across the top of it. Just no areas of concern at all in the Atlantic Basin, and that's what you would expect because, I mean, look at the date. It's May 24th. We're not supposed to have activity this early in the season. Now, over the weekend, Ana became a tropical storm in this area over water temperatures that were sub-marginal. Is that a word? They were subprime, whatever you want to call it. They were not warm enough for a typical tropical storm to develop. So how did it do so? How was it able to generate convection in the absence of, there's the word, sufficiently warm ocean temperatures, and thus all of that latent heat that we expect to see down in the deep tropics? Well, the answer, at least one of the answers, is there was an anomalous pool or a deviation from the normal, colder than normal, air situated above it from this upper level trough that had carved out over that area. And so it left Ana with its very small heart, if you will, its warm core, underneath that upper level trough of cold air. And all that anomalous cold air allowed the convection to be a little bit stronger than you would see. So it's one of these sort of out of the tropics. That's why part of the reason why we call them subtropical storms, but that's not the only reason. But it's not a typical occurrence in the deep tropics because the warm water will give you the energy you need. In this case, the water to the north and east of Bermuda is, warm enough, but to get thunderstorm activity. But it was that cold air that was aloft in this upper trough that had dug out over here that helped to generate the convection. And that's why Ana briefly became a tropical storm. Notice a couple other things. We have big high pressure sitting out over the eastern United States here. And on the backside of that, the return flow. Yuck. More moisture into Texas. I saw the Chris Farley meme, where he says, "For the love of God, please stop raining." I saw some of that today from people in Texas. You just got to be hating all this moisture. That moisture will stream north, and it'll help to fuel some severe weather threats. Nothing major or widespread. But I guess if it happens in your yard or your farmstead, it's major. We'll take a look at that towards the end. Another thing to look at, and this is important here from Ryan Maui, a tropical cyclone, Yas, maybe that's how you say it, Yas, something like that, is formed in the Bay of Bengal and is forecast to intensify to about 100-mile-per-hour wind over the next 2 days before landfalling there in the Odisha coast in the northwestern part of the Bay of Bengal over here, so northeastern India, under the gun perhaps. And these cyclones can bring devastating storm surges because the Bay of Bengal up there funnels the water very efficiently. In one respect, we're lucky that it won't head up here to Bangladesh. Nevertheless, the northeast part of India, certainly vulnerable enough. People will have to deal with this. They're still dealing with, in the news reports, lots and lots of COVID issues, and so people having to crowd together or evacuate. That could be an issue, so we'll have to hope for the best. It's interesting. Let's go back to that track. By the way, these reds show you sort of the intense part of it. Some of these indicating perhaps that it makes it to major hurricane equivalent intensity. But look, it tries to get up in here close to, what's through here, right? The Himalayas. So maybe some much needed moisture can get wrung out of it later on for that region, as long as it's not too heavy a rain period, because too much rain, you know what that can do. It gives you a lot of problems in and of itself. So we'll be watching that on social media. I'm sure lots of news reports and video will be coming out of there. Lots of smartphones in that area of the world. Not much in the way of weather can get by us these days. All right, moving on to a little bit of classroom for you. What is this map? Well, I talk about the SOI often, the Southern Oscillation Index. I talk about INSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation phenomenon, and there's all these different parts of the world that we look at for different pressure patterns and so forth. So I just wanted to remind you of some of these regions that I look at the most, right through here. And part of it, too, is the Indian Ocean dipole, but I'm not going to get into that today. It would just really confuse you. So we're going to focus on the INSO regions, or the Nino regions, and our long trusted friend, the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index, which is a measure, it's just an index, of the pressure between Tahiti, be a nice place to be, and Darwin here in Australia. And typically, and this is what I try to tell you and explain to you, and it's very simplistic here just to get the point across, when you have a positive SOI that's strongly positive, usually about 7 or higher, there's my little up arrow, 7 or higher, especially in the 90-day average, your net flow of wind across the Pacific here is generally east to west. The trade winds are hauling, they're doing their thing, and they might even be blowing a little stronger than normal, and that keeps the warm water in the western Pacific, the warm pool over here, pushed over there. And any downwelling where the water can kind of get pushed down stays in the western Pacific if you have that constant push of easterly winds going on. But when the SOI becomes negative, and we'll put a little negative sign in here, and usually about -7 or lower, then you start to reverse that. There's lower pressure on the eastern side of the Pacific, high pressure on the western side, generally speaking, and the net flow of air can tend to be from west to east. You get more westerlies, and it helps to push the warm pool downward. We call these downwelling Kelvin waves, and it helps to just slacken the trades and warm the surface of the Pacific. And that's when we get an El Nino, or at least a warm INSO, El Nino Southern Oscillation event. So right now we're kind of in between the two, kind of neutral, and I can show you that right here. You see, today's contributor almost -8, but that's just one day. That gets added to all these other days. The 90-day average is about 1.65. So what is that? That's less than 7, but it's not negative yet. It's closer to neutral. The 30-day average is dipping, and you can see that here on the chart as well, the graph. And we're headed more towards neutral is what it comes down to. Clearly, the pattern is guiding itself, if you will, towards neutral. And we can see that also reflected in the sea surface temperature anomalies. All through here, the equatorial region of the Pacific, you got some cold anomalies, a few little warm anomalies, and then some neutral anomalies. The North Pacific, colder than average, and the South Pacific, south of the equator, a little bit colder there. The Atlantic, generally warmer than we normally see, but nothing really substantially out of the ordinary in either basin. If you had to compare the two, the Atlantic is warmer by far than the Pacific is overall, and so there's probably going to be more upward motion in the Atlantic this year, but not as much as last year. And so we won't see, I think, 30 named storms. We probably won't even get close to that. But this is the type of pattern that can give you an active season. 15, maybe 17 named storms, something like that. And if we had 8 or 9 hurricanes develop out of this pattern, that's believable. And 3 or 4 of those would become major hurricanes, category 3 or higher. This is the type of pattern that can give you that kind of a season. You know, and it doesn't have to be hyperactive where, oh, it's setting records. All you have to have is one hurricane or even a tropical storm come your way, and it does just the right thing, if you will, and you can have a very bad year at your house. And that's what this is all about, or your place of business, your boat, your yacht, your sailboat, whatever, your favorite island. Yes, that's what we don't know ahead of time, where these things will track once they develop. But this kind of a pattern, generally a warmer Atlantic, roughly neutral here in the Pacific, that gives us an active season. In other words, it doesn't promote a slack season. I think that's the best way to look at it. So this is interesting. Going along this theme, early May, earlier in this month, the Climate Prediction Center here had their update, and you can look at these different bar graph plots, and as we go along, it looked like La Nina was going to try to make a little bit of a comeback, just a little bit above 50% chance once we got into the fall, with neutral kind of going on the decline there, and almost no chance, well, I won't say almost no, but very low, less than 10% of El Nino. That's the red bars. If we shift it just a few weeks to now, whoa, what happened? Look at this. Neutral seems to be more prevalent, although once you get past the peak of the hurricane season, which is right here, it's really hard to say what's going to happen. You know, nothing is exceeding 50% at that point, except maybe January, February, March of 2022. That's so far out in time, just forget about it. This is the region of time. Is that how you say it? A region of time? This is the time frame that I'm looking at. August, September, October. Those are the peak months of the season. And right now, neutral is favored by, you know, and as compared to El Nino or La Nina, neutral is favored, definitely. But, you know, the La Nina coming back doesn't seem as probable now. And certainly very low chances overall of El Nino as we get between now and the hurricane season. Still only about a 20% chance there. See that right there? I'm trying to draw that line for you. So bottom line, all of these forecasts that we've been hearing about, the one recently from NOAA, Weather Channel just updated theirs, AccuWeather has one, University of Arizona, NC State, Colorado State University, a lot of different people have forecasts, and most of them calling for a generally active season, but it doesn't look like the ingredients are there for there to be 30 named storms again, and that's fine by me. I think we're going to have a busy enough season regardless. So there you go. So now let's move ahead into the real-time analysis of what's going on. Gulf temperatures warming up as you would expect, but real quick, if we go back and look at the anomalies, check out the northern Gulf Coast here, and let's switch this over to the color black. Close. Try one more time, Mark. There it is. Cooler anomalies up along the shelf waters in the northern Gulf Coast. Why? Well, as you well know, we've had this pattern of a lot of rainfall and just this southerly flow coming across the region, kind of mixing things up. The rainfall gets into the river systems, drains out into the Gulf. That helps to cool it a little bit. But it's just the overall pattern hasn't been stagnant yet. What we need to see, going back to my satellite animation, if you want the Gulf to really start to warm, and who doesn't, right? I mean, I know I like a warm body of water to go swimming in. We need the big area of high pressure to kind of link up with the Sonoran heat ridge and just be dominant over the south and cut off all this deep southerly flow, and then the Gulf will just be basically stagnant, if you will, not literally, but close enough. You'll cut down that airflow and it'll warm up much quicker than it is now, because these shallower waters up near the coast are much easier to mix up. Even with a stiff breeze, you can mix those up. Looking at the Atlantic, same kind of thing, although this is where the high pressure is most prevalent. Over the east, it was 95, I think, here in Wilmington yesterday. That was crazy hot for late May. And water temperatures are generally responding. Low 70s along the southeast coast, still in the 60s and 50s up in the mid-Atlantic and northeast. But it's May. By the time we get to 4th of July, it'll be fantastic at most beach locations. All right, real quick, just looking at the wind shear chart. I showed you this more or less on the satellite animation, but here you go. You can see this band of strong upper-level winds cutting across out of the Gulf, across the Caribbean. No areas of favorability from the upper-level wind department at all. All right, looking ahead. This is interesting from Andy Hazelton. Who is that? That's one of these people that I follow and I trust, because I can get a no-nonsense update from Andy on Twitter, and I like that. Assistant scientist at the University of Miami, and also with NOAA's Hurricane Research Division. So that's good. Andy seems to know what Andy's talking about. What is he saying? Well, it looks like the Eastern Pacific tropical cyclone season might awaken a bit in about a week as intraseasonal forcing starts to move into the Western Hemisphere. Wow, what does he mean by that? Well, first, a few snapshots of the GFS at 850 millibars, these blobs right here, concentrated areas of vorticity or energy at about the 5,000 foot level. This is an ensemble mean here, the GFS ensemble forecast system, showing kind of a heat map, if you will, or a cluster of the different pressure areas. The darker yellows and oranges and reds would indicate deeper pressures. So yes, indications are that things will start to get more active in the Western Hemisphere, because this green that's coming right through here, this is your rising motion for this area of the world through here. Right now, this is the present, by the way, up here, and this is the future. The farther down the map you go, or the graphic, this diagram, this is all the favorability. This is the window opening right here. This is not favorable. So we'll put a negative. This is, yes, favorable. Put a positive. You understand? And then you just superimpose this on the map. It's hard to explain, but that's how it works. So rising motion is coming to the Western Hemisphere, and we can see that reflected in the GFS here. This is the North Atlantic Basin shot. There's Africa for you right there. Eastern North America over here, just to kind of outline things for you. Here's that big high pressure bubble over the east right now. Strong upper level winds cutting across. You don't see those here because this is 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. And what we're looking for are any areas where the concentrated blobs come together, if you will. And we don't see that at 48 hours, 72, nope, still nothing. Finally at 96 and 120, 5 days out. Nothing anywhere across the Atlantic Basin, Gulf of Mexico, or Caribbean trying to concentrate. But in the southeastern Pacific, as Andy was showing, yes, we do have it. And we can see that reflected here on the southeast Pacific shot. There's Mexico for you, down towards Guatemala and El Salvador, the Pacific side of Central America. So let me just leave this outlined for you since I did such a good job. There's the Baja Peninsula. All right, so there's the Eastern Pacific. We'll move this out into time and watch what happens. You start to see a couple of interesting things. The wind flow starts to change to more of the west down here instead of just straight across, and that helps to create that spin down at the 5,000 foot level. The vorticity increases, and just a little bit more of a westerly wind component as that favorable Madden-Julian oscillation moves in, and then sure enough, by about 4 days out, perhaps a couple of systems get going and move their way into the Eastern Pacific there. We'll just go back in time and just watch how that evolves. The favorable window comes in, and there those systems bloom. And it won't be long now that I think we'll see from the National Hurricane Center a couple of mentions from the Tropical Weather Outlook, as they too, of course, are seeing this, and they know what's coming. Will this be a threat to Mexico, the Pacific side? Too soon to tell. We don't know, but that's what we will keep an eye on going forward. All right, so will this spill over to the Atlantic side? Well, we'll have to wait and see. This is still a fairly good clip away, several days away from reaching the Eastern Pacific, so we will wait and see if this has any impact for getting things going in the Atlantic. All right, quick look at lower 48 weather. If you're out and about in the plains today, slight risk of severe weather across the Texas Panhandle, western Kansas into Nebraska. Tornado threat, well, maybe western Kansas if people are going to be chasing out there today. And then one little spot up here in the northern part of Michigan. You have a 98% chance of not having a tornado anywhere near you. That's a pretty good, I'll take that bet. But yes, western Kansas is the highest risk right now. The wind threat, 15%. Some of these thunderstorms out there, you can get straight line wind damage. And the hail threat, fairly significant there in western Kansas again. Too bad I can't just teleport out there, because as I have experienced recently, working with either one of our supporters, well, both of them are Matt and Brent, in late April, and then just last week with Brent. Storm chasing per se is really exciting stuff, and I hope to be able to do it more, especially with our brand of how we do things, setting up cameras and the high altitude balloon, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But this is really neat stuff. I see why people get addicted to it, if you will, but it's also a lot of driving, that's for sure. Anyway, that's today, and so let's look at tomorrow. It changes a little bit, no slight risk there, but I think it'll get added for tomorrow. So our marginal risk up through pretty much the heart of Tornado Alley, the traditional alley anyway, up through Michigan. And then by day 3, heading out to Wednesday, more of a slight risk, and I bet this gets jacked up to enhanced somewhere in here. We'll see. It favors the high plains. And then actually, this was interesting, a rare day 4 got issued with a 15% area. Nothing beyond that time frame. We hadn't seen a lot of these this year. And in fact, just to kind of throw this in, the tornado count for this year, we're in the lower 25th percentile. We just haven't had very many tornadoes, and it has been, I can't remember the stat that I read, it's just been seemingly forever since we've had an EF5 tornado, like a long time. I can't remember. I should have had that in my noggin, but too many other things to tell you about. But it's good news. We're not seeing as many tornadoes in the last several years, and I don't know why. That's a story for another day. That's out of my department. But interestingly enough, on day 4, which will be Thursday of this week, the SPC introducing that 15% probability in the heart of Tornado Alley. So you guys just be aware of that. Big hail, straight line winds, and the possibility of scattered tornadoes every once in a while does exist. Speaking of the tornadoes, I was out there, like I said, last week with Brent Lynn, who is one of our Patreon supporters, came up from the Virgin Islands to help out. And help out he did. He designed this really neat payload for our weather balloon, our Herbie project, Hurricane Research Balloon. Whereas I used to use this lunchbox looking thing. It was a yellow Pelican case. It weighed about 5 pounds once it was all loaded up. He had a much simpler version made out of carbon fiber. It's triangular shaped. And it won't look triangular in the video I'm going to show you because this is 360 video on a square. And as you know, when you take things that are spherical and put them on a square, they get stretched and distorted. But we put a 360 camera, the GoPro Max, which I happen to have right here. This wonderful camera that was, actually had 3 of them donated to the project by other supporters. Thank you, Pete, and others that have helped out. I appreciate it. These GoPro Max cameras do 360 video as well as regular video. And I wasn't real sure if it would work. So we put one on there, and this is what we got. By the way, that's a GoPro Hero 4. Those do really well with high-altitude ballooning, by the way, but they don't shoot in 360. So the triangle has one of the cameras on one part, the spot locator with it, and then the APRS transmitter. That was actually up on the balloon cord. I'm just trying to remember everything. And then the GoPro Max was on the opposite corner. Anyway, let me just play the video for you. Again, it's not 360 here, but once I upload this video, I will make it public. And if you have a virtual reality VR headset, such as an Oculus, you will be able to watch it. If it's unlisted, you can't watch it. Only I can in your VR headset. But once I make it public, if you've got one of those devices, this will totally blow your mind. It was incredible. So here's the video. You can scroll around in 360 in your browser. I'm using Firefox here. There's our live camera box that was watching it. I mean, look at that. You can even see the balloon up there. Hold on, let me find it. Really, really neat. There it is. There's the balloon. I was preparing it. Let's skip ahead just a little bit. Brent's over there now. He's ready to get it and launch it. The wind that day, this was last Thursday, I think, or Wednesday. This is last Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember. Days are running together. It was very windy at the low levels, so it took it a while to achieve its burst altitude, but it was really, really neat to do. The 360 camera working great. You can look up and see the balloon. You can scan around and see Brent over here. He's like, oh man, it's really windy, you know, and the balloon was like listing over and getting pushed by those low-level winds. It's about a 40-foot cord that we have on there, and I'm trying to film him. And he's like, all right, here we go. So I'll shut up and just let it play. Yeah, those low-level winds kind of got close to the... Look at that. But it made it. Got to 98,000 feet. There's the frame. You can get the idea that it's a triangle. There's the Hero 4. This is the flight weather computer right here that's logging data. This is recording 2D video, if you will, and then the 360 cam is our point of view. You can look up, you can see the balloon up there 40 feet away. You can look down, scroll around, look at the countryside. This is Calumet, Oklahoma. The balloon gets on up there. It took its sweet time, that's for sure. But look at that. See the wind farms in the distance. Really, really cool. Very exciting stuff. And we went and picked it up very close to Medicine Lodge, some 6 or 7 hours later, something like that. The balloon comes down. We track it using amateur radio, APRS, as well as spot locator. And we were able to find it and give you this video. So the idea, as you know, hopefully by now, is to do this in the eye of a hurricane. So we'll have the data from the Flight Eagle computer that's giving us temperature, pressure, and humidity every 6 seconds, logged on a little microchip there, a little SD card, one of these guys right here. And then the GoPro video, both from the Hero 4 and the Max. And how we power them, well, that's kind of a trade secret there that I'm not going to give away, because I'll just tell you this, they don't run on their own internal power. We came up with our own way, and it worked. And that was the bottom line, because you got to get these up to like minus 50 degrees altitude, in terms of the temperatures up there. They're minus 50. And in some cases colder than that. So the traditional batteries won't work. So we come up with a different way that we'll tell you about it later in a documentary one day. So anyway, it worked. I'll make this video public as soon as I upload it. This particular video, the Hurricane Outlook video, once I upload it, I'll make all of these videos from the 360. There's 6 or 7 parts, maybe more. I'll make them all public so you can watch them on your Oculus or whatever. All right, wrapping things up, I do have just a few of these left. I went and took inventory. There's 22 left. Everybody that ordered one, by the way, I have shipped them. I had about 8 people order when I was gone. I have shipped yours out, so you will get yours very soon. They come in a very nice mailing tube, so they stay very fresh and pristine, rolled up in there. They're not folded, no creases. And you should get yours any day now. But there's 22 of them left, maybe more. It's just, I counted very quickly this morning. 18 by 24 full color tracking map, $22, including the shipping. It's 18 plus 4. This $4 is for the shipping in those nice tubes. And I'll send it out to you. Get your map. It's easy, HurricaneTrack.com/track map. I'll put the link into the description of today's video. Also, on Patreon, I wanted to mention this because I changed one of our parameters here, the Zoom meeting level. $25 a month. I'm going to sign up at the end of the month here myself for Zoom Pro, and that allows me to have 100 people on our Zoom calls, and that's it. And so I have changed this from 375 available slots at this level to just 125. So we only have 46 left, and if you sign up at the $25 level, included in that is, of course, you get a tracking map at no additional cost. That's the first thing. And then I am doing these Zoom calls, Zoom meetings, with all of our $25 tier folks this year. We will pick those up starting next week, by the way, just letting you know. Maybe even this week. I got to sign up for Zoom Pro and get all that going. A lot to catch up on. And then you get some other things. Your name in the credits of upcoming Hurricane Highway episodes and other cool stuff. The $10 level also has its own set of perks. And then the $1 level, I'm phasing out eventually. It's sold out right now. But I just wanted to make you aware there's only 46 spots at the $25 level. And the reason is, I was thinking about it, if I were to be fortunate enough to have 375 people sign up at the $25 level, as wonderful as that would be for funding, what if just half of them wanted to get on a Zoom call when Hurricane so-and-so is coming? I couldn't handle it. And even if I had the plan on Zoom that could handle it, how do I have that darn many people to talk to all at once? It's weird, but I need a smaller audience because I want to still keep that personal sort of feeling between the people that are supporting my work and each other. You understand? I don't want to just be, sure, it'd be great to have 1,000 patrons, 10,000 patrons, and have all the money that I could ever want. But there's more things important than money. It's that personal relationship, the connections that I've made with people, and you lose that if you get too big. So I've got to be careful. So I've decided to scale back the $25 level to just 125 patrons. So there's 46 left if you want to get in on that, and we will resume those Zoom meetings very, very soon. All right, and the link to Patreon, of course, is in the description of the video as well. And one more thing before I let you go, and this is really neat, I forgot to tell you about it. The podcast that I'm doing now, I should have had a slide for it, my fault. It's called Hurricane Season, the podcast. And it's on pretty much anywhere you get your podcast from these days, so search for it. Hurricane Season, the podcast. Or my name, Mark Sudduth, S-U-D-D-U-T-H. It's easy. Apple, Google, Spotify, and I think it's even available through Spotify on Alexa devices. What is it? It's a daily digest, much, much shorter than this video. Howard, it's an inside joke between one of our supporters in Bermuda. Usually 5 minutes or less, and it's an audio podcast each morning that gives you sort of a look at what I'm looking at for the day ahead to get your morning started. So subscribe to that podcast, Hurricane Season, the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, powered by Anchor. I'm not supposed to say that, like they're not paying me to say that. I just thought I would say it. It's a pretty neat thing. It's free, too. Anchor.fm, Spotify owns them, and they do a good job. Make some tools available for people like me to reach good people like you. All right, like I said, this was going to be long. I lived up to that promise. I appreciate you sticking around for all of it. I am done. Have a great rest of your Monday, a great rest of your week. I'll be back again tomorrow with more. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. See you again tomorrow.